Meet Macaulay Culkin. Proof that the American dream can come true, then spectacularly malfunction, all before your 18th birthday. This is the story of how one blonde kid from New York became the world's most famous child, then spent the better part of 2 decades trying to convince everyone he was something else entirely. In 1990, while most 10-year-olds were struggling with multiplication tables, Macaulay Culkin was learning that slapping aftershave on your face could launch a global blockbuster that grossed nearly $500 million worldwide. Home Alone wasn't just a movie. It was a cultural earthquake that somehow convinced an entire planet that watching a child torture burglars was peak entertainment. But let's rewind. Culkin didn't stumble into stardom. He was systematically manufactured for it. Born into a family where show business wasn't just a career but apparently a religion, he started acting at 4 years old. His father, Kit Culkin, managed his career with the subtlety of a stage parent crossed with a military strategist. Kit didn't just want his son to succeed, he wanted him to dominate. And dominate he did. Home Alone became the third highest grossing film of all time when it released, earning $476 million worldwide, which is particularly impressive when you consider it's essentially 90 minutes of elaborate child endangerment disguised as family comedy. Culkin's performance was pitch perfect, innocent enough for parents to approve, mischievous enough for kids to worship, and just barely not psychopathic enough to avoid concerning child welfare services. The aftermath was swift and merciless. My Girl in 1991 proved Culkin could handle drama, specifically the drama of dying from bee stings, while making audiences sob uncontrollably. Home Alone 2 in 1992 was the rare sequel that improved on the original formula by adding more hotel rooms and higher property damage costs. Then came The Good Son in 1993, where Culkin played a murderous psychopath with the same cherubic smile he'd used to sell cereal commercials. It was either brilliant casting or deeply disturbing typecasting, depending on your perspective. Critics were divided, audiences were fascinated. Nothing says range quite like convincingly portraying a child who enjoys pushing other children off cliffs. At age 11, Culkin became one of the youngest hosts in Saturday Night Live history, delivering monologues with the confidence of someone who'd been working longer than most college graduates. The kid was earning more per film than most CEOs made in a year, all while maintaining a bowl cut that somehow didn't diminish his market value. By Richie Rich in 1994, Culkin commanded an $8 million salary, roughly $1 million for every year of his life. His total fortune was estimated at around $17 million, leading to a very public legal battle over control. He wasn't just a child actor, he was a cottage industry. Lunchboxes, video games, action figures. Macaulay Culkin's face sold everything except, ironically, a normal childhood. But here's the thing about meteoric rises. Gravity eventually remembers to do its job. The first crack appeared not on screen, but in court. At 15, Culkin did something unprecedented in celebrity family dynamics. He fired his parents. Not metaphorically, not dramatically, but legally. He pursued Emancipation because his family had turned into a very expensive, very public WWE match over who controlled his estimated $17 million fortune. Kit Culkin, the architect of his son's success, suddenly found himself legally powerless to make decisions about the empire he'd built. It was like watching King Lear, except with more lawyers and considerably less dignity. The father who'd orchestrated every career move was suddenly just another voice in the crowd, shouting at someone who was no longer obligated to listen. Culkin announced his retirement from acting in 1994. At 14. Most people haven't figured out what they want for lunch at 14, and Culkin was walking away from multi-million-dollar film offers. He wanted, in his words, a normal life, apparently unaware that retiring as a millionaire teenager isn't particularly normal either. The transition was brutal. Imagine trying to attend regular high school when you're more famous than most of your teachers. Every interaction becomes performance, every friendship suspect. The late 1990s and early 2000s became Culkin's wilderness years. Depression settled in like an unwelcome house guest who refuses to leave. Substance abuse followed, because apparently someone forgot to mention that drugs don't actually solve the existential crisis of having peaked before puberty. The 2004 arrest for drug possession wasn't shocking because celebrities get arrested for drugs. That's practically a rite of passage. It was shocking because it happened to someone we'd collectively watched grow up. America had essentially adopted Culkin through his films, and now we were watching our adopted son spiral in real time. The comeback began quietly, almost apologetically. Party Monster in 2003 saw Culkin playing a drug-addled club kid, which was either perfect casting or therapeutic role-playing. The film bombed commercially, but proved something important. Culkin could still act, just not as the character everyone remembered. Saved in 2004 was Smarter, a dark comedy about Christian high school politics that let Culkin play against type without completely abandoning his natural charm. It wasn't a blockbuster, but it was respectable. Sometimes respectable is enough. Theater became his laboratory for reinvention. Stage work meant smaller audiences, less scrutiny, and the ability to fail without trending on social media. Then came the bunny ears era, Culkin's foray into comedy websites and podcasts, proving that even former child stars could master the art of deeply weird internet content. In recent years, Culkin has achieved something rare in Hollywood. He's become interesting again. His appearances on Red Letter Media's videos showcased someone who could laugh at his own mythology while still taking his craft seriously. The 2021 Hollywood Walk of Fame ceremony wasn't just recognition of his 40-year career. It was validation that survival itself is a form of success. Culkin had outlasted most of his childhood contemporaries, not by avoiding the pitfalls of early fame, but by climbing out of them. He's spoken candidly about sobriety, about the therapeutic value of selective projects, about learning to say no to opportunities that feel like retreads of past glory. It's the kind of wisdom that only comes from having your life completely derail and then having to rebuild it from scratch. Macaulay Culkin's story isn't really about rise and fall. It's about transformation. He started as America's sweetheart, became America's cautionary tale, and eventually evolved into something more valuable, America's proof that people can survive their own success. The boy who once screamed while being home alone learned eventually that being alone with yourself isn't the worst thing that can happen to you. Sometimes it's the only way to figure out who you actually are when the cameras stop rolling and the world moves on to the next cute kid with perfect timing.